if there's ever a time where we needed to pull together as believers of Christ and unite and try to strengthen and make the world a better place, it's now.
Mm-hmm. And that sounds like he's preaching our message.
There's one body, one church, one spirit, one hope. The realities of the faith, the realities that unify us are already there.
Christ prayed for unity. What should we be praying for? I mean, it's the one prayer request of Jesus. Think about it. In the Bible, that we actually have a say in whether or not it comes to fruition or not.
I think in what God has done in you guys in this podcast and the multitude of folks that you're reaching, the diversity, whatever God intended when you started this, He's able to bring it to completion.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Whole Church podcast. I am one of your co-hosts, Joshua Knoll, here with your other co-host, TJ Tiberius Blackwell.
Morning.
Also with our, I want to say good friend. Man, it feels like we've known you so long. A guest who's been on before, Pastor CT Kirk. We just had him on last month. I know wasn't that long ago, but we had a very important topic that we think he has a unique perspective on. Today, we're going to be asking him about, as a history teacher, his perspective on Black History Month. We're going to ask him a little bit more on his book that we mentioned last time. It's How the West Was Whitewashed. But before we do, we're going to jump in, and we just got a couple things we like to do first. One, we like to review some of what our audience has been saying on social media and stuff. And one thing I like to do is to give 3 of my favorite answers to our last silly question. Our last silly question was, if you had to recast the Ninja Turtles as any other animal, who would you cast them as? Or what would you cast them as? And I got to be honest with you guys, I'm not going to give you my 3 favorites, but only because there were so many answers, like so many. And twice, 2 people said the same thing. So I feel obligated to give those. So both Diana and Miss Mandy said kangaroo. So Teenage Mutant Ninja Kangaroos. Both Russell and Jessica said sloths for some slow-mo action. One answer I did just really like because of her description of why. Our friend Tyler said giraffes, and specifically said, just imagine them going through the sewers. And that was just a hilarious image for me. And lastly, I just want to do an honorable mention to our friend Zeb, who said tortoises, because that's what I should have said. Because
they are tortoises.
Yeah. Turtles and tortoises are just my favorite. Yeah. Anyway, so that was last week's. What's this week's silly question, TJ?
All right. So this week's silly question, which is, for all of us, who is your favorite animated dog besides Scooby-Doo? Yeah. Who is, just overwhelmingly the most popular cartoon dog?
Yeah. Just too easy for people to say that.
Yeah.
We had to take
Josh,
that off.
did you want to go first?
I will. Yeah. Yeah. I don't have a problem with that. He's been on a few different shows. Doesn't have his own show. I really like him from comics, so I feel like I'm cheating, but whatever. He's been in animated Marvel shows. It's a Lockjaw, who is a big giant dog who's just fun-loving, but happens to have the powers of teleportation, and it lives with the Inhumans. And he's just really stinking cool.
Yeah, technically one of the Inhumans. Cool character.
Yeah.
I think my favorite animated dog, it's technically claymation, but that is a form of animation, is Gromit from Wallace and Gromit.
Oh, that's a good one.
Because if you've ever watched Wallace and Gromit, those are great. Those are great movies. And Gromit's a great character. So, Pastor Kirk, do you have a favorite animated dog other than Scooby-Doo?
Other than Scooby-Doo, I would say, y'all might not be old enough to remember Astro from the
Astro.
Yes, I was hoping someone would say that.
Any dog that can call his owner by first name knows his owner.
Yeah.
That's just cool. True. Man, that was fun. All right. So that being said, we're going to jump into the meat of it. Man, we're really honored to have you, a history teacher who recently wrote a book on this exact subject. So it's crazy that we get this opportunity. So as a history teacher and an author of a book about Black history, what could you tell us about the importance of having time that's dedicated specifically to focusing on Black history in America?
I think that Black history is American history, And I think if we're ever going to move beyond the racial tension that we see in our country, we have to recognize the different contributions of all people of race. And I know that African American history or Black history was set aside as a time to honor the legacy and the accomplishments of African Americans, especially during the early 1900s, where there was no recognition. Early 20th century, where there's no recognition of African Americans in school or in the media. But I think that we're beyond those times now, that we have to set aside a certain month to honor those who have contributed to our country throughout the years. And so I think that it is almost a disrespect now to say Black History Month and then basically say, well, okay, we're going to teach everything but the contributions of African Americans the rest of the months.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's pretty much, it seems to be what most people think now. It's like, there's really no reason to subjugate it to just this 1 month. It really doesn't make sense. But yeah.
So you don't think it's helpful to have a time specifically dedicated to it? You think we should just always include it with everything else?
Exactly, because I think that when you explain history, the only other time you hear about African Americans, you hear about Frederick Douglass sprinkled in when you want to cover slavery. But really knowing those major contributions, and then I see a lot of teachers and people try to gather up some lessons or try to mention a couple people. And so in school, you hear about Dr. Martin Luther King, but you don't hear about Marcus Garvey. You don't hear about Medgar Evers. You don't hear about those that were fighting during the civil rights movement. And I think that it's almost as though we're just saying, okay, now February, everybody turn on your diversity and teach African American history, rather than saying, okay, no, we recognize this as American history. Because I think if you say that we have to teach African American history, then we should be teaching Irish American history. We should be teaching Polish American history, but all of that has been consumed into America, and so should African American history.
Okay, so it's not like St. Patrick's Day where it's like a special day to recognize this. You think we more use it as an excuse, basically?
I think it's outlived its importance, and I think that, again, when you look back at the history of it, it was important because it wasn't celebrated. But now if we're saying that we're forward moving, if we're progressive, if we are trying to meet that level of diversity, then we got to stop excluding people from history and just saying, okay, now we're going to give you your month. We're going to give Hispanics their month. Then we're going to give Native Americans their month. If this is truly American history, then why not put it all in a bowl and say, let's just teach it as it happened?
Okay, so you think it was important once upon a time, but it's kind of come and gone when that was necessary.
Yeah, I think anything that becomes mundane, it's like if you do communion on the first Sunday of every month, it loses its value. And I think that when we say, okay, February is your month, bang, I think it loses its value. And you see people trying to, like I said before, trying to get lessons together, but it's not really celebrated anymore because we know February is coming, and then we gotta give a couple of graham crackers to the African American history. But I think that if it was incorporated into curriculum all through in the year, then we would learn these things as they happen.
Right.
Okay.
So how often do you think stories like those told in your book, How the West Was Whitewashed, get told in schools?
Never. Never. Most people don't know about Stagecoach Sally or Brett Johnson or Bass Reeves. We're just finding out really who Bass Reeves was through some articles on the internet, but they never get taught. In fact, when I was teaching in 5th grade and we talked about the Western expansion and the frontier, we never talked about any African-American cowboys. We never talked about any African-American outlaws. In fact, it was just sprinkled upon. You talk about Sitting Bull, Custer's Last Stand, and then you move on to something more interesting.
You're right, because like I did learn about Bass Reeves in high school, but not through high school. My friend Cameron and I just found out about Bass Reeves, and we were like, "Man, that's awesome."
I can tell you way younger than me because I didn't even know who Bass Reeves was until I was in my 30s.
Yeah. So, speaking of Bass Reeves, can you tell us one or a few of the stories you write about in your book? Tell us about them.
Well, Bass Reeves was one of the probably the most well-respected lawmen out in the West, even transitioning beyond going from slavery to actually being a lawman. And we know that after slavery, the next thing that really kind of happened was Jim Crow in order to once again suppress African Americans. But Bass Reeves was very well respected as being a lawman. In fact, according to historians, the Lone Ranger show was really written about the life of Bass Reeves, because Bass Reeves did have a Native American person that they would call Tonto, along with him on many of his arrests, and he even wore disguises to disguise and played tricks upon those criminals in order to be able to arrest them. But then, as segregation began to get heated up more so, when Jim Crow became even bigger, he had to retire from arresting people out in the West.
Mm-hmm. And it was an incredibly impressive arrest record. He made, I think it was 3,000, and he only ever killed 14 people, and he was never injured. It's insane. Bass Reeves is probably one of the coolest dudes to ever live. He had a killer mustache. And I mean, if you haven't seen it, go look it up. It's great. It's incredible. And also, I just found this out today. Bass Reeves has a great grandson who plays in the National Hockey League, Ryan Reeves.
Wow.
And I thought that was awesome, because I knew who Ryan Reeves was and I knew who Bass Reeves was, but I had no clue they were related. So that was,
So, Pastor CT, you mentioned a couple times Jim Crow laws. A lot of people who listen to this may have heard of that. I've heard it a lot, and it wasn't until last year, I think, that I really researched it and learned exactly what those were. Could you just explain to people what Jim Crow was all about?
Jim Crow laws had to come in order to kind of erase what the Black Codes were set to do. The Black Codes were established during Reconstruction to really give African Americans some rights after slavery. And the Jim Crow laws were launched to really bring in that segregation, that part of history that really said, okay, you drank your water here, or suppressing the right to vote. And so when we talk about Jim Crow laws, we talk about laws that was really set to suppress African Americans from really rising up. And it probably did just as much damage to African Americans being able to come up as slavery. And a lot of people don't focus on the Jim Crow laws, but we still see sprinkles of segregation happening now, whereas we're seeing our schools go back to being more segregated than they have been in the last 60 years. And so when we think about Jim Crow laws, I think it's very important for us to understand that these are the reasons why a lot of African American stories could not be told on television or in movies.
Mm-hmm. And that's, even the Lone Ranger TV series, which was, I don't remember the decade it came out, but it was early enough to have been in black and white. But the main character was a white dude playing as the Lone Ranger. But, that's something that came about because of Jim Crow laws.
Yeah. And I think it's important to notice that Hollywood has information that they knew. You still see it today. The 2000 and something version of the Lone Ranger, which was probably a bomb, cast a white person as the Lone Ranger once again. But Johnny Depp really as Tonto was kind of like, what? And so we see now that Hollywood is more about making money than really telling the real story.
Mm-hmm.
And that's pretty much always true. Disney's Pocahontas is kind of atrocious. Fun movie, but
just kind of atrocious, just a little.
Well, it's a great movie, but it's also terrible misinformation.
Right.
If they had used all different names, it would be a good movie.
Yeah, just made up a whole new thing.
Yeah, instead of using all the same names to make up a completely new story. I just don't. Anyway. Yeah. So, in what way? I'm sorry. In what ways do you think? I know you mentioned that Black History should be, instead of delegated to a month, it should be all the time. In what ways do you think learning about Black history in that way would impact our ability to move forward in light of everything going on right now?
I think it gives us a realistic view of history. We're in a time now where they have been taking down statues of Confederate soldiers or those that supported racism in some fashion. And I was not a favor of taking down every statue. I said we need to add more statues to give a realistic story. We need to add the statue of Frederick Douglass right beside one of those statues that were removed so that we can get a realistic story. If I'm talking about slavery and I don't know who Sojourner Truth is, and I don't know that she was the first African-American woman that really got the ear of President Lincoln, then I don't have a realistic view of the contributions that African Americans made through many monumental parts of history. Even the women's movement and Susan B. Anthony reached back to African American women and say, you know what, on this issue, we're all women. We can't vote no more than you guys can vote. And I think it gives us a realistic view of the whole history scenario that Asians were used as bomb testing in the Great West when the railroad was being built. Hispanics is where we get the chaps from and the spurs on shoes and the cowboy hats. When we don't have all of this history at our hands and where we're just saying, okay, you know what, we're just separating them in months and we're going to give a little bit tad bits, then we think that American history is only white history, and it's not. It's everybody that contributed to making America great. And I think that if that was really said, then when Donald Trump said, let's make America great, everybody would have felt that America was going to be great because everybody's contributions and accomplishments were established and noted.
Mm-hmm. So, Pastor Kirk, what do you think the biggest obstacle is for furthering racial equality today?
Teaching it in our schools. I think that it has to have the foundation and the establishment of our schools. I think that because you look at generations, one thing you're not going to change is the way that somebody believes in their household. But school is like that ultimate foundation. And one thing that we teach in our school is Socratic teaching, which gives the children the opportunity through a series of questions to derive at their own answers. And Socratic teachings, there's no right or wrong answer, but it allows the children to be able to be taught from each other and at the same time seeing a different perspective. That's one thing that I always try to do in my classroom, was show a different perspective. That if we're going to evaluate the 1960 cop that sprayed the water hose on the African-American children, let's see what this man's mindset was. Number one, he had a job, he had a family, but this was also law that he felt like he was protecting. And I think that when we see each other's perspectives and stop saying, you know what, that where somebody's always calling a race card or everybody's racist, but sit down, like Dr. King said, at that table and talk about these issues, then we're going to see more racial equality. We can't expect for America to be unified when America has never been unified outside of September 11th. And so unless we're going to have another tragedy that brings us all together, we got to be able to sit down and talk so that our differences can be put on the table and then we can learn to heal.
Right.
Yeah. You know, while we're talking about this, I kind of wanted to get your take on, I was just thinking about how I would answer that question. And I just kind of wanted your opinion. I really feel like one really big obstacle to at least my generation and maybe even my parents' generation is, and this is going to sound weird, is learning dates of when things happened. Like it really keeps dawning on me how recent a lot of this happened, like how recent Jim Crow laws were or some of the redlining that happened. I learned this week, and this blew my mind, that Dr. King had a significant part in helping one of the cast members of Star Trek do what she did, being the first interracial kiss on TV. And I was just like, wow, Star Trek, that's something I kind of grew up with. I knew about that. And that's just crazy to me how recent some of this is. Do you think it would help if people understood how recent a lot of this damage was done?
Oh, absolutely. I think that we're not far removed from some of the uglier parts of history. And I think that, you know, and like you said, it's very important because our grandparents lived those days. They have their perspective, and that perspective got passed on to a child. That got passed on to another child. And we're the products of people that actually seen what we're reading about in our history books. And so I think that first those minds have to understand that we're only 60 years removed from those moments. And like you said, those dates are very, very important.
Yeah. It's one of those things I believe is intentional. You know, whenever you see a picture of one of Martin Luther King Jr.'s marches, it's in black and white. They were not so long ago as for the pictures to have had to been in black and white. There are color photographs of those. And I do feel like they are usually aren't used to try and distance those events from, the present.
Yeah, make
to make
feel
it
better
seem like
a long time ago.
right.
Yeah, yeah. Even my grandfather's actually even told stories of just because where he grew up, thinking that talking a certain way and saying some things was okay, and then getting to see the world and being so embarrassed and feeling so bad because it wasn't that long ago that he was just never taught not to say some of these things. And that's, I know my grandfather's kind of old, but he's still around. So it's just kind of like, that's recent, Yeah.
So, do you think, what do you think we could learn from history to help us get through this time?
I think we can learn so much when we look at it. It's amazing that 60 years ago, technology has advanced to the point now where our cell phones do things that computers do the things that maps used to do the things that talking on the telephone used to do. Our cell phones have advanced so much, but yet our mindsets are still so far behind. And I think that the first thing that we have to learn from history is when there was griping, when there was complaining, when there was internal fighting, it opened up the world to be attacked. You look at ancient Rome, is what my class is talking about now. Ancient Rome was one of the most powerful empires, but what destroyed ancient Rome? It was fighting within. What destroyed Greece and brought Greece down? Fighting within. And I think if America does not understand that internal fighting will only open up the door for further attacks from outside of the world, because the world is looking at us and they're saying, you know what, let them destroy each other, then we can come in and reap the harvest. And I think that that's what history is going to show us, that whenever there's internal fighting, whenever people are against each other, nobody really wins at the end. And I think that it's sad that another generation of young people are born that's still wrestling with history, still wrestling with somebody looking at them because of the color of their skin or because of the religion that they worship. It's sad that we're still stuck, even though technology has advanced around us.
Mm-hmm. Hey guys, we just wanted to take a quick break to tell you a few ways you can support the Whole Church podcast, your favorite church unity podcast.
Yeah, so you can always rate this show on Apple Podcast or Podchaser. You can sign up for our newsletter either on our website or by emailing us at thewholechurch@gmail.com. You can follow us on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. You can share this episode on your own social media. You could donate to our Cashapp with the tag in the show notes. You could follow us on Patreon at patreon.com/thewholechurch podcast, or you could subscribe to this show wherever good podcasts are found.
Yeah, especially that last one. It's probably the easiest way to make sure you get all the episodes when they come out.
Yeah, and to show us that you really love us. Yeah. All right, so let's get back to the show.
Indeed.
So, could you think of any scripture that maybe directly addresses the need for history, or even the need to, or you talked about how when we're divided, that could be an issue. Could you think of any scripture that you think directly speaks to this subject?
Yes, sir. The one most important scripture that addresses this is when Jesus basically said, after seeing it in the Old Testament, a house divided against itself will not stand. And that is very important. And you can find that in Matthew 12, 22 through 28. And so basically, I think that the houses that are divided against itself will not stand. I think that this is even apparent in our churches, that if our churches don't deal with the racial issues or how people are seen and perceived, then it only weakens the body of Christ, and it weakens all of our ability to witness. I was so spellbound about how the church really seemed like it was divided over political parties, that you had some saying this and you had some saying that, and the world was watching. And so if we don't get our houses intact and our foundation strong, it's going to hurt our ability to witness.
Mm-hmm. I always, for a long time, I thought that was an Abraham Lincoln quote, a house divided cannot stand, because he did use it in his speech to the Republican, whatever. He used it one time. He said it. It's a great speech. I don't remember it, but I always thought it was really funny that it seemed like, I grew up in upstate South Carolina. So I've probably seen well over 1,000, house divided flags, but about Clemson and the Gamecocks.
Yeah.
And people just take it and they're like, yeah, we are unwell in this house.
Yeah, like they're bragging about it.
Yeah. It's like, yeah, we don't have healthy conversations about sports in here. But, I didn't realize how dumb that was until I was like, man, it's a Bible verse that says it's bad to be divided. And was just like, yeah, I like that. But anyway, we're asking everyone this month, because it's Black History Month. This is coming out in February. Do you have a favorite Black theologian or church leader that you can tell us about?
I'm always a fan of Dr. G.E. Patterson, the late great G.E. Patterson, and his ability to articulate the scriptures and bring such a well-rounded telling of the scriptures that brought life, and it told the stories like that captivated audiences. And so I always like it. But I think that probably we'll still always agree that Martin Luther King was probably one of the greatest theologians outside of being a civil rights leader, because we're still quoting his speeches today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So should our listeners go and see what G.E. Patterson did?
Yes, sir.
Read about him, because I trust
the Wikipedia page. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you know? This is me showing just how child Josh was just dumb. But like until I was in middle school, and I think it was in later middle school, I really thought that Martin Luther King Jr. was like Martin Luther's son. Like they were just all part of the Reformation somehow. Yeah, it just.
Did your teachers ever tell you why they changed his name to Martin Luther King Jr.?
No, I don't think they did.
His name was actually Michael, and his dad felt that Martin Luther was more of a reformer and more of a distinguished name upon learning about him, and so decided to change his name and Martin Luther King Jr.'s name to Martin Luther instead of Michael. So imagine if it would have been Michael King Jr. instead of Martin Luther King Jr.
I had no idea.
That's crazy. Yeah. Well, yeah. See, I didn't know that. That's so weird. I knew there was Martin Luther King Sr. than Martin Luther King Jr., and I just thought, it was just a thing. So at one point, it was would it have been Michael Luther Sr. and Michael Luther Jr., or was his name something else?
Martin Luther kind of came together from the Reformers.
Okay, so it was just Michael. Was it Michael King Sr. and Michael King Jr. though, or did they have different names before?
Yes, sir. Okay. Up until I think Martin was around 3 or 4, it changed.
Oh, okay, crazy. Wow, who would have thunk? Learn something new every day. Wow, what a great podcast. This is worth it just for that.
Yeah. There are so many just name changes throughout history that just you really wouldn't know about unless someone explained it to you.
Yeah.
Like even Bass Reeves and his great grandson Ryan Reeves, they spelled their last name differently because at some point someone in the family was like, well, I don't want to honor your or bear my enslaver's name anymore, so I'm gonna change it. And then even in ancient Rome, Octavian, I'm gonna get this wrong.
You're going right. You're going right, Augustus.
Yeah, Octavian and Augustus, same dude.
Yeah,
crazy. Wow,
but, happens a lot.
That's it's sort of like, see, and I've never been able to confirm whether this is true or not. So I just, everybody, take this with a grain of salt, I guess. But I've been told that somewhere in my family history, we were French and my last name was Noel. Then when the Germans came in, instead of, changing the name, they were like, hey, if we just say Noel, they'll think it's German. I like to believe that that's what happened, just because I think it's funny. But I guess we'll never know. But that being said,
we'll have a different episode on how names change. So look out for that.
Yeah, Pastor CT will be back for that too. Don't worry.
But man, Old English spelling really messed a bunch of stuff up.
That's true.
But anyway,
so we asked you this before, And it wasn't even that long ago. But I'm going to ask you again, and maybe you can come up with something new. At the end of every episode, we just like to ask if you had any one tangible action you could have everybody listening go do that would better help church unity, help maintain church unity. What would that one practical action be?
I think that one action that would need to be is if everyone of a different race could find someone else, give them a hug and take a picture with them and post it on social media. I think that we need to see, because social media is the hot driving force, it's more mightier now than a newspaper or a talking in a barbershop, but everybody puts things on social media. But if we see more racial unity and more growth on social media, I think it would do a lot for us because a lot of people are not going to read history books. They're not going to look at different programming outside of what they're comfortable seeing. But I think that if people saw hugging and people saw embracing and one people as one race on social media, it would do a world of good.
Yeah. And for some of you, you might need to wait till after the pandemic, but
yeah. Or hey, bump elbows, put on your mask.
Yeah. Just take a, most cameras have that wide angle now. Just stand 6 feet apart with your mask.
Yeah.
But so go ahead, TJ.
Okay. So what do you think would happen if everyone started doing that?
I think it would destroy a lot of stereotypes. I mean, could you imagine a Baptist preacher getting with a non-denominational Pentecostal preacher and taking a picture and starting something that our revivals wouldn't look separated? Because I know a lot of times we talk about racial separation, but look what denominations did to us. Denominations basically say, you stay over there with your group and I'm going to stay over here with my group. We're going to do it this way. Can it be the littlest doctrinal problem that really keeps people away from each other? And I think that if we started by saying, you know what, we're going to come outside of our shell and begin to have conversations with other people that may not agree on everything we agree on, but if they still stand for righteousness, then hey, that's still our brother. I think that would go so far over. I think our leaders need to do it.
Oh yeah. I absolutely agree. And this would have to be a whole nother podcast. But when Martin Luther,
whenever you need me, I'm ready.
yeah, great. Well, when Martin Luther and the Reformers were separated from the Catholic Church warned that would happen, and there'd be, you let everybody read a Bible for themselves, that there will be this kind of separation. And I don't think the separation over doctrine is necessarily a bad thing. The separation with the attitude that some of us have, you know, to say, hey, we believe differently, that's fine. Go to a different church, learn different things. But if you can't come together, I think that's where the problem really is. Mm-hmm. But again, that's a whole nother podcast.
The inability to unify is much worse than separating.
Yeah. Well, I think unity, the way the Catholic Church was talking about at that point, Catholic Church is wildly different now. Don't think we're attacking the Catholic Church, but that kind of unity where, hey, if everybody's ignorant, they'll be unified. Mm-hmm. That's not impressive. That's not a light to the world in the same way of, imagine all the different denominations and all the different disagreements we have and still coming together, being unified, educated with different opinions. That stands out a lot more than unity because of ignorance.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. And that's what we're aiming for.
Yeah.
But to get on with it, CT, you've been on here before. You know how we like to wrap things up. We like to do our God moment segment. We all share something that God has done in our lives recently. A blessing, a moment of worship, something challenging, any of those things. So I always like to make Josh go first. It fills me with joy.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mine this week is going to be relevant to the topic. So that's great. But my second cousin, I don't know, my mom's cousin, I don't know what that makes her to me, but she passed last week from coronavirus, and her mother passed last year. I forget, her father passed not that long ago. But what I'm getting at is when my papa passed, and when all of the other members of our family passed that have passed on that side of the family, we've had one guy, his brother Frederick, I can't remember his last name right now, unfortunately, but he did the sermons for a lot of those funerals. I think all of them, if I'm not mistaken. And he is a man of color who he's so close to our family that I literally just forget that he's not family. So when he was doing the service today, I was able to listen to a little bit to it, and because they did it online. It was so funny because at the beginning he mentioned how him and Wayne are brothers, and how, even though our skin might look differently, some people might not be able to see it. And I was like, huh, that's right. He's not actually related to us. Like, it just hit me. Like, I just forgot. And I don't know, man. It was weird. It was a very sad moment, to be sure, but it was also a blessing to remember the family that I do have, to remember that my cousin has gone on to be with the Lord, and that strong church family presence that's involved with everybody. So it was a pretty good moment.
Right. I believe a personal relationship can overcome any racial prejudice. It's just more difficult to build that relationship. At least I hope that's the case.
I agree.
But I think my God moment for this week is, going to be a blessing. I've had like a sharp pain in my right shoulder, just like right in the rotator cuff, for a little while now. It's, I don't even remember when it started. It's just there. But, I haven't really felt it in the past 5 days, 6 days. It's just not there anymore, So that's great. I'm super thankful for that. I can
Praise God.
properly pick things up now. But
get back to playing tennis.
That's been, I did it anyways with it when I was playing tennis. But anyway, maybe that was the problem. Yeah.
Just not used to
So, CT, do you have a God moment for us this week?
Oh, yes. My God moment is definitely how out of the shadows of despair and hurt, a people that's committed to the Lord will always rise. And I think even in situations that we see in our world today, if we stay committed to the Lord, we shall rise above any moment. I think moments like this come to definitely show us our ability to have faith and trust in God, as well as our ability to really test forth the scriptures. I've been able to have more engaging, intelligent conversations in the last 3 weeks than I have in a long time. And I think that's because when people start seeing things from a different perspective and being able to talk about them, then we start on that road to racial unity and harmony. And so I'm thankful that God will always show himself faithful at the end of any experience. I was able to reconcile with a brother pastor within the last week because of some things that happened at the Capitol. And that brought us together to be able to have that conversation. And I think that the world needs those tough conversations to be able to put to bed any offenses or any misguided information that we have. A lot of times when we don't talk about things, that's when we are led to our own imaginations. And then at the end of the day, we find ourselves, if we'd have just talked about that grudge wouldn't have lingered as long. That hatred or that malice wouldn't have ever been able to enter into our minds if we sat down and talk about it. So I think a great God moment is simply have those conversations and then agree to love at the end of them. It's going to be mighty.
Mm-hmm. That's that Socratic discourse.
That's right.
You have to know other people's opinions to learn.
That's powerful. Yeah. Man, I could just talk all day, man. This has been really great, really a joy. But
it's true, he can talk all day.
Yeah, and that it is true. But we do need to wrap up. So where, and I know you've told our audience before, but could you remind them, where can they find your books and your sermons and everything that you do?
They can go on Facebook, of course, CT Kirk. I got a CT Kirk author page. The book is available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, secondsale.com, authorpublishinghouse.com. And so excited about that. I'll be doing a book signing February the 6th. I don't know if it's going to go out by February 6th, but February the 6th at the Mercantile Building from 12 to 3. And people can come, get their book signed or get a book. We're going to have music, food, and everything. And then we're going to talk about the book as well.
Awesome. That's actually my birthday. So.
Oh, you got to come out.
It'll be a great day.
Yeah.
But all right. Awesome. And you have your church has a Facebook page as well, right?
Yes, sir. Sanctuary of Life Outreach Center.
Awesome.
All right. So some future guests for the Whole Church podcast. We've got Paul Calcote of the Real People, Real Talk podcast. Reverend Keno Kennedy and Sister Sylvia Staten, great friends of ours. Pastor J.R. Martin, Joshua's godfather. No
Great
big
guy.
deal. Greatest mustache in the game, at least in our church. And of course, at the end of this season 1, we will have Francis Chan.
Yeah, he just has no idea, but that won't be an obstacle.
Right. That is
I assure
simply
you.
not going to stop us.
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
All right, and of course, if they want to hear the last segment, TJ, what do they got to do?
Yeah. Well, you've got to go over to Patreon, slide us a couple dollars under the digital table, and you can hear this last segment we do. So thank you guys for listening, and we'll see you back here next week.